I put one mic for you also.
All right, so I think we have to start now. It's the usual first day hectic, a bit chaotic, and we have to walk all the way. We didn't get a car anyway. So now, so I'm so happy. I'm happy to welcome you all. And first we start from the participants. We have students from our center, Center of German Studies, and from other centers of the School of Language, and from other schools, philosophy, School of Arts and Aesthetics, and other schools. What's happening? Yeah. Okay. And also former students who traveled all the way from Madras, like Lipin, and came. And also this lecture series is offline and online. So many are watching this online. So I thank all of you and our Dean, Professor Shobha Shivshankaran, and Director of the Gyan Program, Professor Patnaik. And let me introduce our guest, Professor Fausto Fraisopi. Professor Fausto Fraisopi is currently Emidex Excellence Chair, Transdisciplinarity and Complexity Research at Aix-Marseille University, Marseille, France. In fact, I met him in Freiburg, so where I studied. So he was Vertretung, that he was yeah? Yeah, genau, exactly. So the so-called Heinrich Rickert or Husserl or Heidegger chair, the main, the C4 in Freiburg. It happened like that, you know, after, you know, even before the Gerold Prauss, who was the chair, who retired, emeritiate, and it remained vacant for some time, 3 years. And even after Figal, it remained vacant for 4 years. So this chair has a very strange Schicksal, we say, the fate. Yeah, Professor Fraisopi is from Italy, from the heart of Italy, Rome. So he's Roman. And as you know, this in the area of philosophy of science, what happened in the last few decades is the very competent Italian scholars went all over Europe. And so they studied in England, in Germany, in France, all over, and now they're working there too. So I know them, some of them, and incidentally they all studied in Lab Sapientiae in Rome, in philosophy of science. So to name a few, Michele Massimi, who is now in Edinburgh, and Silvia De Bianchi in Milano, and Vincenzo De Risi, who was in Berlin working at the Max Planck Institute for History of Science, a very renowned scholar, Chiara Ambrosio in Cambridge, and now Fausto. Yeah. So he studied in all over Europe. So I just read out a short biography. So he was, I mean, before this position, he was in Freiburg, as I mentioned. After his studies in theoretical philosophy at University La Sapienza and a thesis in history of philosophy, University of Macerata, and conducted within the Métaphysique, Histoire, Transformation, Actualité in University of Paris, Sorbonne. And he was a postdoc researcher at the same university and at the École Normale Supérieure in Paris. And Alexander von Humboldt Fellow at the University of Freiburg from 2010 to 12. And he defended his habilitation to direct research in 2015, where he was appointed außerordentlicher Professor, that is Professor Extraordinary, in 2021. And since 2025, he is strongly engaged in questioning and studying complexity science of complex systems and science. And among his publications, these are all French, l'auteur, anyway, de la vision, la complexité et les phénomènes nouvelles, or I can't pronounce it, since my French is not sufficient. Anyway, there was one German, Untersuchungen über die Formen des Mathesis, from Freiburg im Breisgau, And Matthias ist Grundvernunft 2020 von Baden-Baden und Philosophie et Demon on Metaphysics from Paris. This is phenomenal because these Italian scholars, they speak all the European languages, Italian, French, German, English, Spanish too, no? And travel all over Europe and publish, teach as a real privilege as compared to the British who speak only English. Yeah. So, and so as I told you, he had his habilitation from Freiburg, Albert Ludwigs Universität, and he was in École Normale Supérieure. And yeah, I mean, a lot of publications, and I mean, probably we will discuss it in the course of this time. So, so we are very happy to have Professor Fausto Freisopi here. I know that the theme of this lecture series is a bit not really within our context, like the Center of German Studies. It's not even philosophy, it's philosophy of science mostly. But in our center, particularly in German Center, we have a course on philosophy, and not just in philosophy, in various other courses like theory of literature and other theories. So we actually deal with philosophy a lot, and there are many dissertations being written at the master's and postdoctorate level. And so this is the first lecture, the inaugural session of a lecture series on the emergence and understanding of a complex world. Yeah. So I thank particularly our Dean, Professor Shobha Shivashankaran and Professor Satyavada Patnaik. And I must say, for the first time, I really enjoyed working with the JNU administration. And they are so supportive, and when it comes to organization and money also, I hope. You know? So getting the money. Yeah. So because, you know, as is known, this, you know, you easily get support from ICSSR and other things, but then there's a long bureaucratic process. But he and his team, Saurav and Professor Patnaik, was so supportive, and so we could easily organize things such a short notice, because this is the first lecture series in the Gyan JNU. There are many lecture series, so that's going to happen. So, so we are very thankful to you, Professor Patnaik, and this should be also a kind of an inspiration for my colleagues to organize this, because I've never known this Gyan earlier. And so I met Dev Saragi in the French Center, and and he told me that he has already done three lectures, so two or three. So that means this is a wonderful opportunity. So we can invite a scholar from Europe or from anywhere, from Germany, and for now this is the longer program for 10-day lectureship, and now we know more or less how that functions also. So thank you everyone. Now I would invite Professor Shobha Shivashankaran, the Dean of our school, to say a few words.
Good afternoon. As Dean of the School of Language, Literature and Culture Studies at JNU, it is my distinct privilege and honor to extend a warm welcome to Professor Dr. Fausto Freisopi, who will be delivering a 10-lecture series on the fascinating and timely topic, the emergence and understanding of a complex world. This lecture series, supported by the Global Initiative of Academic Networks, GYAN, a prestigious initiative by the Indian Ministry of Education aimed at fostering global academic collaborations, represents a significant milestone for our academic community. It is the result of a collaborative effort between Professor Freisopi and Professor Babu Taliyat, chairperson of the Center for German Studies at our school, whose dedication to advancing interdisciplinary scholarship has been exemplary. Professor Freisopi's remarkable academic journey spans several disciplines, including theoretical philosophy, phenomenology, and the philosophy of science. His distinguished career has taken him across Europe, reflecting a truly transnational and transdisciplinary ethos. As an Italian scholar educated in France and Germany, and currently holding the prestigious Amidex Excellent Chair in Transdisciplinarity and Complexity Research at the University of Aix-Marseille in Marseille, France, Professor Freizopi embodies the spirit of intellectual curiosity and cross-cultural dialogue. His visit to JNU is both a moment of pride and a unique opportunity for our students and faculty. Our school, which is home to an extraordinary diversity of philologies encompassing both European and Asian traditions, provides an ideal setting for such a lecture series. This event underscores the confluence of intellectual traditions, highlighting the shared pursuit of understanding complex realities, a theme that resonates deeply in today's interconnected world. Philosophy has long been a cornerstone of our curricula, contributing profoundly to our academic programs and research endeavors. Within the Center of German Studies, the rigorous study of Western philosophy, ranging from ancient to modern and postmodern thought, has cultivated a fertile ground for interdisciplinary research, exploration and research. Professor Freizopi's focus on the philosophy of science, a domain that remains relatively uncharted for many of our students, introduces an exciting dimension to this intellectual landscape. His lectures will undoubtedly illuminate the relevance and potential of this field, particularly in fostering interdisciplinary approaches to research and inquiry. It is also worth emphasizing Professor Freizopi's alignment with the tradition of continental philosophy, a school of thought that has deeply influenced the teaching and research ethos of us at our school. His scholarly contributions offer a bridge between theoretical frameworks and real-world complexities, making the lecture series not just an academic exercise, but a transformative experience for all participants. I want to take this opportunity to express my gratitude to Gyan and to JNU for their visionary support of such collaborative initiatives. I also commend the Center of German Studies for its leadership in organizing this event, which promises to be a landmark occasion in the academic calendar. To the students, doctoral candidates, and faculty members from JNU and beyond who will attend these lectures, I encourage you to fully engage with the ideas and discussions unfolding over the next 10 days. This is a rare occasion to learn from a scholar of Professor Freizopi's caliber and to explore the intersections of philosophy, science, and transdisciplinary research. Once again, I extend my heartfelt welcome to Professor Freizopi and wish all participants a rewarding and intellectually enriching experience. Let us together embark on this journey of exploring and understanding the complexities of our world. Thank you.
Thank you so much for so much work. And I would now invite this being the first lecture series in this year and about the Gyan and yeah, that's your take. You can speak.
So, good afternoon and namaste. So, this is a program of Gyan. So, after 10 days, so this is not G-Y-A-N, G-I-A-N, okay? Gyan is definitely you would receive through these talks, but this is a networking, global initiative academic network. The aspiration is to get the best in your field to the campus, and students learn through interact, and they need to, opportunities in their institute, and it's more like interaction. That's what we really want to smash the idea that everything can be learned through downloading program in YouTube. Interaction is essential for learning anything original, and that is the aspiration of the Gyan program. So this is G-I-A-N along with G-Y-A-N. Okay, so it is the network building that is the prime aspiration. I happen to be a physicist and with aspiration to be a philosopher. And so this is a very warm welcome. Many of my physics colleagues would be very inclined to, things are actually complex. I mean, Einstein says somewhere, things can be simple but not simpler. If you go just one level beyond, I mean, we'd like everything to be simple, but this is working because of what is called electronics, because of transport of electrons, and the most acceptable theory of field theory will tell you electrons do not exist. So what we have learned, that electron having a mass of 9.1 × 10⁻31 kg, charge of 1.6 × 10⁻19 coulomb, these are some picture where you can explain what is happening. But in reality, electrons appear and disappear only during interaction. There is nothing called, when I'm walking, I am able to walk because of friction. And friction is an electromagnetic force. So when I'm walking, I'm able to walk because of continuous exchange of photons between my shoe and, so things can be very complex if you really want to try to understand, particularly even in physics and philosophy. And so this is a wonderful occasion, and that many of my colleagues from the SPS would be keen to follow this. And of course, there is a philosophical and language aspects also. So this is the importance that there is an interdisciplinarity that is involved. And this is completely funded by Ministry of Education. So we should remain indebted to them. And there's a GYAN Nodal Center. So my best of wishes to all of you, all the students and faculty members. And we look forward to, learn more. And so this is not a conference series or a talk series. It is more of interaction and network, and that's why we invite, and everyone would learn from each other. Thank you very much for coming to JNU. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Patnaik. We are very happy that you are here and introduce the GYAN program. But I must also review that there is good funding also, which is GYAN. Like we have been organizing conferences, spending from our pocket. So in that sense, this is a very good funding. There are, I think, more than 6 or 7 GYAN conferences.
12.
12 now.
12 before March. In January, March, 12 courses.
Oh, yeah. That's really a prestigious
And the
thing.
GYAN is open again.
Yeah.
People who want to apply, so they can.
Okay.
This year we have 12 before March, yes.
Oh, wonderful. And I must tell you that the application process is relatively simple and coherent, and we have all the supports from the GYAN cell in JNU, and also when the organization starts also. I think with that, this informal inaugural function, I would now invite Professor Faustus Resopi to give the introductory lecture and say what you want to say.
I talk on this microphone, on the other? This? Okay, perfect. So, welcome everyone. I'd like to thank firstly for the warm invitation of the GYAN program, and thank the Dean for and my colleagues and friends, Babu Taliats, for the kind introduction and for the kind introduction. So I will just shortly introduce, not myself, it was already introduced and explained, but what I do more precisely, and then we will introduce us to the thematic or the topic of complex word, and then present what we will do in the next 8 days concerning pedagogical and theoretical stuff. Okay? So what I do, according to the nomination of, is going? Okay. What I do, this is theoretical philosophy in Europe almost, began with the foundation of European culture and the specifically definite word that is theoria, that is sight. That is theoretical philosophy aims in few words to look better what is happening in the world through discussion of culture, critical discussion of culture, but almost critical exploration of positive form of knowledge like physics, anthropology, biology, and so on and so on. What the metaphysical tradition in Europe called first philosophy, in the sense of proto-episteme. This is a sort of first foundational discourse on science, what science is, and how. No, the cable. Okay, it's working.
Yeah.
What is to live in a world of phenomena still changing, and to understand the structure that enable us not only to understand the world, but to live in the world, build strategies in the world, and so on and so on. This is the classic task of philosophy, formalized or formulated by Plato and Aristotle and in the 50th century before Jesus Christ, and dictating a long tradition of studies pursuing is run today with such a struggle, revolution that I will explain today. So I'm very, very grateful for the invitation for two reasons. Intercultural dialogue, because there is people in Europe that are grown up appreciating and venerating also the Indian and the East culture. Personally, I spend my youth by reading Vedanta, Bhagavad Gita, and Upanishad, and respecting profoundly the historical civilization of Indian culture. I'm very, very grateful for the invitation in order to establish such a new dialogue in an old kind of intellectual cooperation. And secondly, because in such a complex world, I think that dialogues and different culture must dialogue and interact themselves and not fight, as some from the far west presume to do, in sort of fight, struggle, economical battle, and not only economical battle. So philosophy opened horizon to dialogue together, struggle together, but even in a friendly atmosphere, in order to build bridges where others dig trenches, and in my view is the first and most important rule, societal and political rule of philosophy. So let's step in our theme or in our topic with two preliminary comments. The first is the structure of the course. We structured together the course in 8 lectures plus a workshop, considering the fact that everybody is not sensed to know everything I said. The workshop, this interactive questioning and asking dialogical exchange, is for you more important, in the sense that if something is not clear, and it is trivial that something will be not clear, because instead I will not be here to teach, you can note and ask for the dialogue after. So, and then we will, in 1 hour, discuss structures, maybe also sketch patterns in order to let you understand, in particular, things about physics, modern physics, Galilean physics, many-dimensional space, and so on and so on. The second is that we will go not only theoretically, but also historically. So, and to understand a complex world by science, we have to understand before all what the common paradigm of science, or this of positive knowledge about nature and society, is, that it explores just a little bit what is the foundation of science in an objective sense, or the objective meaning of the words. That is, explore just a bit what did people like Galileo Galilei, René Descartes, and Isaac Newton, in order to understand how and at which mass the new science of complexity overcomes certain presupposition of that science. Okay? Such presupposition are not presupposition about method, but are metaphysical presupposition. That is presupposition about a worldview, what is stronger to deconstruct and stronger to appreciate. For example, I was talking yesterday with Babu. You have in India a great woman, not only this great woman, this is Vandana Shiva, that studied about philosophy of the foundation of quantum physics in Canada, that says that everything coming from modern science is to waste up in order to adopt a new vision of the world. Okay? Because modern science is reductionist, modern science is sowieso, this is in order to say, sorry, my German teaching comes, is to reject in order to accomplish a new view of the world. I agree with the second part of the statement. We have to accomplish or to develop a new view, a complex view on the world, but not everything of modern science is rejectable. For example, 2021, the Nobel Prize for Physics was given to three physicians that modeled complex phenomena. Giorgio Parisi, whom I heard in my early years at the University of La Sapienza, Sokuro Manabe, a Japanese, and David Wasserman, a German, about complex system. If a Nobel Prize is awarded on a such topic, it means that such topic rule the science today, like quantum mechanics today, like network theory, and so on and so on. And if you ask to scientists, no one will say that Galilean science or Cartesian science or Newtonian science is to waste up. Why? Because we have, through the elaboration of the method of Cartesian science or Galilean science, the chance to individuate, as always in science, objectively variance and invariance in nature. So what we have to waste up is the metaphysical presupposition of such world, grounded on the simplest parts, without emergence, without novelty, without ecosystems, and so on and so on. And the course will help you, I hope, not to do or to practice concretely philosophy of science, but to understand how a scientific approach to our world can help us even to build new strategies. For example, we will approach the problem in the fifth and the sixth lesson about models and ecosystems as radically ecologically oriented and for ecology, but without the ability to read, to understand, and to present to society what is a scientific ecological model that is presented in the panel of global meeting on ecology and so on and so on. We cannot change the mind of people. So understand what is a model, understand why we have many models in science, understand what is the probability of objectivity of a model, by interrogating, questioning, and even criticizing modern science, does not mean that everything of modern science and modern culture is to waste up. Okay? So the approach is just a bit different because we have to go through modern science to deconstruct some aspect of modern science and modern Western philosophy, but not to waste up in a sort of dichotomy, yes or not. Okay? It's more question of appropriating a culture that determined, according or not, science today, culture today, and to elaborate new strategies and even new forms of life according to the complexity of our world. Okay, this is the main goal of our course. So sort of changing our view on the world, what Plato defines in the old Greek language, metabasis tes dianoias, this is sort of transformation of our worldview, or transformation on our view on phenomena and on the world, and also on the man. So, let's start with the mortal question. What is such complex world wherein we live? Let's start with a fundamental intuition coming from Indian culture. If you go, or if you know what is the LHC, someone know what it is? LHC, this Large Hadron Collider, is the greatest collider of particles in the world, where all people from the world come to study the elemental features of matters. When you go to the Large Hadron Collider and you sit in the middle of the two buildings of the two experiments, this is Alice and Atlas, Alice and LHC, you find the statue of Shiva. Okay? You can say, why the statue of Shiva in a Western hub for science? And the reason is these quotes from the beautiful book of Fritjof Capra. This is one of initiators also of complex thinking, on the Tao of physics, an exploration of the parallels between modern physics and Eastern mysticism. As I sat on the beach, my former experience came to life. I saw cascades of energy coming down from outer space, in which particles were created and destroyed in rhythmic pulses. I saw, this is the change of the view, this new intuition, the atoms of the elements and those of my body participating in the cosmic dance of energy. I felt its rhythm and I heard its sound, and at the moment I knew that this was the dance of Shiva, the lord of dancers worshipped by the Hindus. End of quotes. So, what is that? It is that not only in the Western civilization, for example, from Heraclit to Hegel, becoming is a key feature of the world, but also in the Eastern culture, and shift to a world of stability from a world of becoming, of transformation, is the change of worldview that we must accomplish today and in our courses. What does it mean, complex world? How do we experience it? How do we think its phenomenality? Are the three main questions that we have to answer together during this during this meeting. So, but in order to structure our questioning, let's begin to the first question. What does this mean, complex world? And before all, how do we experience it? Because before to become a sort of scientific and philosophical topic, the complexity is in our everyday experience. And such philosophical theories or philosophical school, name it phenomenology, learned to me how to question the first basic level of experience that is our complex world. Mr. Patnaik mentioned the computer, and let's fulfill the example. Is very, very illuminating. Okay, you open the computer, you schedule a meeting with your friends at the other side of the world, I don't know, Chile or United States, okay? And everything goes simple, okay? But if you pay attention to the multiplicity of dimension involved in your experience, nothing is simple. Why? Because you have not only to do with the interface on your computer, okay, the interface is just an interface. You have to do with crossing of dimension. First of all, crossing or intertwining of informatical dimension, because the interface cross many ontologies in order to let you access to your social media, through social network, and so on, with a very, very complex formal language, crossing ontologies, crossing data, matching data, and so on, just in order to let you able to click on the friends list on Facebook and to write to someone other. But also cultural intertwining of dimension. We are all together here. I am European, coming from just another world, in order to say, and my perspective on the world is different from yours, is different from African people, is different from Australian, and so on and so on. At the time where the world was not global, we can arrange you to say, okay, I remain in my vision, maybe I open my vision to others, but anyway, I can sit on in my dimension and interpret the world from my dimension. Today, with a global world, is no longer possible, because problems coming from other sides of the world come here to India, problems coming from India go to the other parts of the world, as well as cultural impulses, economy, and so on and so on. So, conscious, aware or not, we experience a complex, disorientating word, okay? A word for which we don't still have a pattern, a common pattern, okay? So, the experience of our world is structured from a first basic feeling at the beginning. And that first basic feeling at the beginning is disorientation. Okay? We cannot longer orient us in our world. For example, I arrived yesterday from Europe, and I was puzzled from the difference of form of life and many other things. Of course, there is sort of places that are globalized, and Great Mall in India is not too different from a Great Mall in Paris, or a Great Mall in Germany, or a Great Mall in Abu Dhabi. But the life world, the dimension of our life world is very different. Languages, sensory experience, and so on and so on. And by changing the perspective, we have a sort of disorientation. We are puzzled, dazed and puzzled, in order to say, what is the kind of new world coming to me from the other side of the planet, and so on and so on. But you can also articulate the question from political and social cultural point of view. Everyone talked to us about climate change, okay? Climate change is caused by rapid and brutal soil erosion and industrial production from the other side of the world, from countries you don't know, and for what you don't have patterns to understand. Why I have to adapt to a change caused from the other side of the world, starting from 2 centuries ago, okay? In the urgence of climate change, today that problems becomes our problems, okay? As the problem becoming from the massive population increasing of India or China on the global production of CO2, and so on and so on. We don't know really how to handle with those global questions, because our forma mentis, this is the shape of our mind, is used to think simply, or the simplistic. But it is not bad to think simply or simplistic, okay? To simplificate. Simplificate the problem often means solve the problem, okay? For example, let's take a sort of phenomenological experience, okay? The world of object around us, the products, tables, manufactured object, and so on, are stable. The world is the world of stable object, okay, steady, if you will, okay. If we spring, for example, to an ecosystem, we don't have the same patterns about it. If we spring to nature, we don't have the same pattern to understand it. What does it mean? It means I cannot think an ecosystem or the global supply chain. Let's take some example, okay? Or a massive migration of population, let be animal or let be human. I cannot understand it with my patterns of objects, okay? With the low regulating object, low regulating borders, for example, and so on and so on, okay? When you approach such problem don't let simplify themselves, okay? That's sort of resistance of some problem to simplification. Our experience has sedimented along millenaries on the simplicity of object manufacturers and so on, by ignoring the general context of complexity of nature, complexity of mass population, complexity of culture, and so on and so on. And the goal is to rediscover it in order to copy our existential feeling about the complexity of the world with a sort of epistemic dimension, okay? That is, we question what the knowledge or what the positive form of knowledge says about complex system in order to copy with our existential, singular, common, societal dimension of life, okay? That is what, in general, philosophy do, which is a sort of ambitious one. And then, only by copying the existential situation is a sort of disorienting complex world with the epistemic dimension of questioning what a complex world is, we can afford to question social political challenges that are nowadays global. So we start from existence, so therefore from our experience. We go to experience, through experienced complexity, to the idea of complexity in the form of complex systems, and we will explain in the second part of our courses, this is the fourth, fifth, sixth lecture, what a complex system is, or what a complex system can be modeled, and then we become a sort of philosophy of a complex world, just in the end. So you have to wait the end in order to have some satisfactory conclusion. Thinking about complexity of the world must always start with a radical meditation, which is another kind of stuff that the science, this time, not always suggests to us. That is just dealing in the opposite. If we deal with a phenomenological experience of a complex world, is not say that we will be able to understand the complexity of the world just because epistemic structure help us to fix out what the complex is, okay? On the opposite, if we start with scientific issues, it's not sure that we understand what the complex world is, what is the horizon of our life in a complex world. So this form of radical meditation on our existence, our being in the world, on our societies and cultures, on the dynamics of knowledge, this is a human phenomenon, and on the challenges that humanity as a whole is called upon to recognize as its own, we do not understand although we do not reach the goal to change our view in order to live better and to act better in a society that is a globalized, global society. This stems from that. In the West, Aristotle defined it as proto-episteme, if you use a sort of Greek words, or proto-philosophia, or prima philosophia in proto-philosophia in Greeks, prima philosophia in Latin. Let's think about Descartes' meditation on first philosophy. We will approach shortly, or what we call today first philosophy, or if you will, I will take the difference metaphysics. Okay, metaphysics is not a sort of metaphysics is many different kinds at the same time. But anyway, first philosophy is not a sort of empty speculation or a armchair metaphysics suggested by Timothy Williamson, speculating on the world. Is sort of this difficult and hard task or work to toss together the existential feature of our life with science, mostly, and with the rigor demanded to such tasks. I'm not free to formulate an hypothesis and then to deal by consequences what the world is by my armchair. It's necessary to make a standing friction with positive knowledge, with our existence, and to put in a sort of mirroring in order to become this radical change of our worldview. So let's come to the concrete structure of the course. We have three horizons of research: history of science and transformation of knowledge, with reference back to the emergence of modern paradigm of knowledge that I mentioned before, and its crisis which gave rise to contemporary complexity science. Epistemology and theory of science, with a particular focus on the content and practice of modeling, as well as transdisciplinarity of research design. We touch what is interdisciplinarity or transdisciplinarity too, and as a sort of first chapter of first philosophy, we have to do to ontology, with special regard to the problem of emergence from theory of mind to ecosystem theory. So one question is, in order to just take a stop or a break, who knows what ontology is? Yeah. So ontology, it was a sort of resonant name. Ontology is not such a speculative thing, a sort of doctrine for initiates, but it's the questioning about what is that. Okay? Beginning with Socrates, beginning with Plato and Aristotle, we ask, what is that? We have a definition, but the definition of common features, definition are our approach to things get common features. Ongoing from this common feature, we build sort of theory of object in general. Okay? Ontology is a sort of most encompassing theory about what something is in general. Okay? If you have just steady object, you can develop a sort of static ontology. We will see in further lectures. If you have something like ecosystems or migration, massive migration, or bio structures, you cannot simply say what it is with a sort of definition. Okay, you have to make to encompass in process ontology. You have to encompass what is the change, what is changing while maintaining the same nature, and so on and so on. So at the end of your journey, the Dean mentioned it before, a journey, at the end of the journey we have to ask, what is such thing as complex systems? Okay? So the three sections mentioned above will concretely concern the emergence of complexity science, or complexity as such by science, the features of complex systems, and the understanding of complex and global challenge as the last issues of our journey. So let's just mention what we will do in our first lecture. The second lecture will lay with the historical, scientific, and philosophical foundation of an intelligence of complexity from the scientific paradigm of the modern era. When I mention scientific paradigm of the modern era, I mention an author in particular. This is Thomas Kuhn, who wrote The Structure of Scientific Revolution in the late 50s. And we will just ask how complexity science, or our view on complexity, must challenge this view on the world. Starting from the Renaissance up to the establishment of modern science in Galileo Galilei and René Descartes, it will be shown how modern science models its epistemic approach, that is its scientific approach, on two fundamental notions, okay? That of the simple or pure and simple object, objectum pur, so that is the corrector of word that is correct even if it wills and not I will. Objectum purum et simplex in Old Latin or scholastic language, and the linearity of causal series, also called absolute determinism. What is, can I, no. Here. Let's make it interactive. So, let's begin from the idea of ecological shifts or ecological crisis today. The reports, EPCC reports, say to be careful if we continue business as usual, our ecosphere will collapse and bifurcating by doing conditions of life impossible for 90% of humanity, okay? What is this bifurcation? And why we can not explain, not only to you, but even to scholars former to modern science in Europe or in the West, in the United States. Because, and then we will explore it carefully, just be not impressed from the thing. What we think as a process, what we think a process is a sort of punctually object moving in a sort of trajectory, okay? That is what we mean as linearity of processes, okay? That line is not, of course, the line in the space or in a sort of material space. It can be another kind of line, another kind of trajectory. But the problem is that we don't know, and that is sort of inscribed in our mentality, that the process can bifurcate, and while bifurcate, and while bifurcate, and while bifurcate. This is our brain, if you will, resist to this idea. Why our brain resists to this idea? Because from the hunting man of prehistory till now, if we follow an object, we follow a sort of linearity, not right, but linear trajectory. So we assimilate the idea that the object, no matter what, as simple as pure object, simplified from every kind of point of view, follow a simple trajectory. Okay? And the modern science is so great, let me say, modern European science, but now it's the science everywhere. If you go to Peking, if you go to Australia, if you go to South America, you meet scientists that recognize that Galilei is the founder of science as such. I would say, I would nuance it that he's not the founder of science, but it's sort of founder of an objective science. Every scientist refers to this model and refers implicitly to the metaphysics developed for this model, that nature is ruled by simple processes that cannot bifurcate. Okay? That's simple. As if you go with our brain function by metaphors, okay, by generalization and so on, or by analogy, okay. If I follow every kind of object around me, this object follows sort of line of behavior, okay. Why we cannot understand the nature as such, following such behavior, okay. There's a generalization with massive mathematical tools that give rise to the science as such, and if you let me say, give rise also to our technology. If we are able to transmit a sort of conference by satellites, the satellites circulating around the Earth, thanks to this equation, okay? Not sort of mystical approach to nature, okay? And so on and so on. But we have to understand, if you will, how it's mean in inner of our mind, if you will, okay? How works that idea, that this Greek idea, because he let Galilei and Descartes let it, or Newton let it us make a jump in our civilization, okay? A progress. What it means that nature is made of simple or pure and simple object and by linearity of causal series. Okay? By this view, and it is even what is implicit in Vandana Shiva criticism, by doing so, the worldview of epistemic approach to the world relegates complexity to the margin of reality, what is called in scientific jargon noise, you know? Yeah, that is complex, but let this complexity at the margin, let the noise, as a sound engineer, isolate the tone and the voice. The first step of historical critical reconstruction will provide a better and deeper understanding of the foundation of scientific reductionism. The world is made of simple processes and simple things, like atoms, or how many things you heard, I hope less than in the West, that our brain is like a software in a hardware, okay? Today the metaphor, or Mr. Elon Musk and all these pioneers, sort of, okay, sort of man says that our brain is like a software, okay, implemented in a hardware that is our body. It's just a fake, scientifically speaking, okay? But this is the vision that by simplifying can give rise to stability and even to world domination, but that is another political kind. But that is reductionism. Our thoughts, our feelings, our expectation as just the result of a series of 0-1 bit succession. That is the reductionistic point of view. Or, if you will, what is nature? Nature is just the interactive sum of its components. Okay? Then there is no specific entity like a biological system or an ecosystem, just molecules, atoms, subatomic particles, and so on and so on. Okay? Just reducing by the simplest. The problem is that the simplest that is the subatomic interaction, are not simplest but are complex. But anyway, they will be not taken by the ideology of reductionistic society or reductionistic science. Second lecture, or the third lecture after this, will precisely consider that incubator of contemporary science represented by so-called foundational crisis of modern science. That is the period of enormous scientific ferment from the discovery of non-Euclidean geometries, and we will explain what a non-Euclidean geometry is. 1860, that we speak about more than 1.5 century ago, to the consistent formulation of the negative results of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle and Gödel's incompleteness theorems. Okay, do you watch Oppenheimer movie? So at a certain point, when Oppenheimer go to visit Einstein, who is still afraid from the discovery, Einstein was working with a certain strange type. Okay. Not speaking and looking at this type was called Gödel, that discover not only the incompleteness theorems for logic, but give rise to informatics as such. If you have here the Apple symbol, the Apple symbol comes from Alan Turing, okay, and the bit idea of bit information theory comes from Alan Turing, and Alan Turing made nothing else to implement to a machine the recursive function of predicates formulated by Gödel for discover this for reach this incompleteness program. This is we have the basis of our technological society, if you will. On one point, the one side quantum mechanics, and the other side logic, information theory, and so on and so on. An attempt will be made to explore the history of science from the perspective of the limitation of idea of such strange things. That is mathesis universalis, that is the full mathematization of the world. Okay? A knowledge based exclusively on mathematics. Okay? That is today on algorithm. And deterministic origin that refers to this idea as the opening moment of a science of complex phenomena. And in this perspective, we will focus in particular on 3 moments. The 3-body problem, and if you follow the media, the 3-body problems was a series presented by HBO last year. What? Netflix, sorry. Netflix, okay? But do you know what is a 3-body problem? Okay, well, we can understand what is the 3-body problem from a more epistemic point of view. The problem of omnimodal determination of physical interaction raised by Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, and there is a dialogue between Einstein on one side and Bohr, Niels Bohr and Werner Heisenberg on the other side. These people are active at the late 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, all Nobel Prize for Physics. And thirdly, Gödel incompleteness theorems. Of course, we have 2 hours. I will not demonstrate the incompleteness theorems, as I cannot demonstrate sort of uncertainty principle. We have just made familiar with the idea that the modern, most advanced science is grounded on an idea that refutes that idea of linearity of causal series and refuse the linearity of a full and simplification of the world by mathematics. Okay? The third lecture, or the fourth lecture, from this perspective, especially since the debate between Einstein and the Copenhagen School on the concept of the word picture. What is a word picture? This is the idea of modern rationalism consisting in saying that we can put the world in a sort of grid design, okay, in a word picture. This is like frescoes from Michelangelo, for example. Everything belonging to the world can be put in a sort of grid fresco given by knowledge, okay? And completeness, that is, our knowledge is able to reach, even at the infinite of its progress, a complete determination of what the world is. The contours of a new worldwide in which the completeness of logical processes and the completeness of determinism no longer represent the horizon and normative framework of science will be outlined. That is, today, maybe the most fanatic, but anyway, no scientists say that we proceed to a full, complete determination of the world. For example, I know another great physicist named Carlo Rovelli that published also many books in English about physics and philosophy. And for example, every scientist, even in complex science, say today that we get, in the best case, 10% of knowledge about the world. And as more we know, as less this percent is not the opposite. This is not sort of cumulative fulfillment of a task, because the world is precisely complex. Methodologically, we will focus the emergence of the lexicon in seminal works that displayed an epistemic-oriented approach to complexity by considering a couple of concepts where the shift between the two worldviews are the outline. And that will be fundamental, because there is not only concept belonging to science, there are concepts belonging to our worldview. For example, the opposition between things or object is already a more raffinated concept of a thing, but let's say thing, and system. And within this thematic coupling between closed and open system. Okay? But that I will make. There's no stress, no panic for today. The shift or the opposition between energy and information, on which grounds today the cybernetics, okay? So, artificial intelligence is made possible by changing the view that not only energy is transmission of energy or package of energy is possible, but by this transfer of energy, we have a sort of transfer of information. No IA, no computing machine is possible without this shift, okay? So you live in an informatized society, ruling on this presupposition that we can transfer information and not only energy, okay? What is not the case of classical physics? Linearity, non-linearity of process, what we will show more in detail. That is linked to the second. Equilibrium, far from equilibrium systems, okay? That is, in the East civilization is not the case, but in the West civilization ruling economy, even from point of view of economical theory, equilibrium is the key concept, okay? Everything happens, but at any time a system finds an equilibrium, okay? And it is not well if a system don't find an equilibrium. It's not true, okay? Every living system or life is a sort of play or intertwining between equilibrium or far from equilibrium state, or if you will, between order and chaos. But to use order and chaos mystically, not rationally, is a bit dangerous, let's say more precisely, equilibrium, far from equilibrium system. Then order chaos, but informed by this concept, and poiesis, autopoiesis. That is, in this view, there is no autopoiesis, there is just a poiesis. A cause made an effect, this is a poiesis, okay? The idea of autopoiesis coming from Maturana and Varela, and this is two Chilean intellectuals, and mostly from biology and cognitive science, made our approach to the complex world more consistent. Such construction will enable and orient both our theoretical, structural, and genetic, scientific, historical perspective on the complex world. Then let's go to the feature of complexity. Okay, this is just a list. Okay, if you will, not an empty list, but in any case, a list. So, in the fifth day, we will ask, what does it mean to look at such epistemic feature of complex phenomena or complex system from the philosophical point of view of concept analysis? Sorry, my German comes into. That is, what is something to be something like complex system? Okay, and I will explain you why we will reduce in the first step our complexity approach to complex system, because rightly speaking, complexity is a feature of a complex system. It can be trivial, but by adopting complex system, we have to do with something that can be analyzed from the point of view of concept. What is a system? What are the elements of a system? And then, what is a closed system or an open system? What is the difference? For example, if we take this watch, it is a system, okay? And if you will, is a metaphor of the nature coming from the model world, okay? The world as a huge watch, okay? Who is the watcher, or the war-maker, is God, okay? That is the idea coming from Descartes, to some rough presentation of Descartes. What is an open system? What are the elements of open system? Are the same elements, and so on and so on. There is, in my view, or on my experience, speaking about complexity means often speaking in vain, because that can be taken as a mystical discourse, as I mentioned before, as a speculative discourse. Complexity as the nature of the world, of our life, and then open to every sort of mysticism or every sort of unrational conclusion. When we speak about complex system and we identify by the definition of a complex system what is complexity, or by the definition of system what is complexity as a general feature of the system, we are more close to sort of grasping things than collecting words. Thus, one can simply list properties and concepts of the complex, and then we will analyze and read together. If you opened already the drive or the materials, there is sort of huge thing of 700 pages. You have not to read it. It's just in order to you to give the introduction. We will just focus on the introduction of the book, and then take some chapters, but not read 700 pages. Non-CD interaction, symmetry breaking, holonomic, non-holonomic limitation, intrinsic global coherence, and all these things we will occupy our fifth lecture. That is, in order to have tools to do what this complex is, and then to apply to complex thinking, or the complex phenomena, migration, and by considering that a key feature of complexity, of complex phenomena, is that not every phenomenon must include every property, wherein for deterministic science, once determined what matter is, we can reduce everything to its behavior. Okay. Then in the fifth lecture, we will outline a general but epistemic informed, I will not based, because based an epistemic approach on 2 hours is just a bit utopistic. But anyway, epistemic informed overview of complex phenomena point of view of systemic iteration of their features. And then in the sixth lecture, we will develop the epistemic understanding of complex phenomena. That is the relationships between theory, model, and ontology of the system. Let's come back to EPCC COP 21, 22, we are in 26, and so on. The 26 was in India this year. Huh? Saudi? Okay. So if you climatologist, for example, okay, come to you and say that many models, okay, say that if we continue business as usual, our climate or our geosphere will collapse. Does it not will collapse at all, will remain, but unable to live for humans. The negationistic Trumpist can say, show me the certainty. Okay, it's not certain, it's a model. Yeah? That is the discourse of negationistic people. Okay? You show me a model. In the case, we have to do with probabilistic EA simulated models, okay? But it is a model, it's not a demonstration, okay? So, the relationship between theory, model, or model validation and ontology of a system is the key feature of the complex approach of the world. A world that is, we are not sure 100% about the behavior of a complex system in future. Okay? There's a key feature, if you will, frustrating our need for stability and necessity. Okay? Because coming back to the modern science, if Galileo sees to the cardinals of the church, I will show you with certainty that at a certain time in the sky, this planet will be in this position, okay? It's true. So the scientific revolution emerges and wins about on clerical conservatorism of the church. Why? Because it can show with certainty the point where a system will be in a certain moment of its behavior. Okay? This is the greatness of Newton general gravitational theory, okay, or Einstein relativity theory. Einstein, on the model, predict the gravitational waves 100 before the discovery of gravitational wave. Okay? That is not the case for complex systems. Okay? We can predict, but not with absolute certainty, because we deal with probabilistic EA, often EA simulated models. Okay? Then, if in the modern science, model was just a mathematical one, okay? We developed mathematical model in sort of formalism. And then the essential relation was between the theory, the general theory, and the ontology of the world. Now we have a sort of in-between dimension that is essential. It's happened even with economical models, okay? Neoliberal economical models predict something about a sort of Grenzenslos, that is limitless growth on industrial production and growth production. Okay? That is sort of deterministic principle that has nothing to do with the complexity of economy, coming from the old world of modern science. Now, our model is constructed and validated between theory and experimental check of ontology is essential for our view on society, supply chains, and so on and so on. Okay? Climate change. So how is it possible to epistemically grasp a complex phenomenon? What does it manifest itself? The fundamental outcome of our analysis of spatiality and determinism in the modern age. For this reason, the first two introductory lectures will be on the modern science. From Descartes to Laplace. Monsieur de Laplace is the one who said to Napoleon, while asking, how is God in your system? I don't need God in my system. Everything is deterministic. Okay? And someone coming from mathematics know for the Laplacian equation, okay, sort of evolution of Newton equation. And our analysis of the emergence of an epistemic consciousness of complexity from multidimensional topology to fractals and to strange attractors. Just one note in order to give a bit spice, to make this thing a bit spicy. All you know fractals, maybe, okay? Fractals is something that we cannot experience by naked eye, okay? It's made from sort of things developing itself by dimension that are not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but 3, 4, or 1/2, and so on and so on. And we will just become familiar with this. And the strange attractors, even coming back to climatology, all you, because it's also a movie in the science fiction, heard about butterfly effect. Okay? We will discover that the butterfly in the butterfly effect is not an animal in nature flattening its flies, but it's something more complicated that is sort of strange attractor. Okay, discovered by a climatologist that formulated the butterfly effect problem. This sort of thing that does not belong just to science, even to our culture. I mentioned I don't know how science fiction movies and so on and so on. I can mention every scene of Matrix trilogy in order to illustrate that, and we will do by the course. So, multidimensional topology, on which is made our computer. Okay, if every software now needs a multi-dimensional topology, or fractals, or strange attractors. We go on to outline the essential concept of modeling and spatiality typical of nonlinear complex systems. Central to our consideration will be the idea of phase space. That is, that this thing is not a space in a tridimensional sense, but a sort of more refined idea of space. In the second part, for example, if the people negationists say where a climate system bifurcates, the climatologist can say, I cannot show you with my finger, because the space in which the climate system or a biosystem bifurcate to non-resilience and so on is not tridimensional, but it's a phase space. Okay? And then the negationist says, no, that is not real. No, it is not, that is not real. It's real, but you are unable, or you don't will, to recognize that there are other forms of spatiality. Like, for example, people thinking that the face I'm watching on Zoom is the real face. No, it's not the real phase. It's the recomposed phase and so on, based on a multi-dimensional topology. So denying it is denying a sort of large part of our world, not only technological, but also biological. The second part will show, by virtue of their nature of complex phenomena, simulation and EE support, are essential to capture patterns that guide empirical experimental confirmation, that is the ontology, but also policy in the world. That is, today we take massive decision on our economy, if we are able to take, and these decisions are based on model, okay? It's not just a sort of picture, it's a model, it's another kind of thing. The issues we introduce are the epistemic or philosophical core of an understanding of complex systems, namely the relationship between theory, model, or plurality of models and ontology. What, I don't know for Indian culture what is, but for the West is very irritating and disturbing. Why? Because I mentioned the foundation of Western philosophy, and the foundation of Western philosophy in a special place, this is a Plato dialogue, the Sophists, consists in excluding imagery or images or model as a true approach to reality. Okay? But it's not the case today. So, there is not simple images as sowieso copies or imperfect copies of reality. It's a sort of microscopic or telescopic that give us access to something that we cannot see on naked eye. Defining the entirely new and plural relationship between image, model, and theory on the one hand and ontology on the other hand, what it is the consistency of the world, in other words, will allow us philosophical access to the problem of epistemic and non-epistemic experience of a complex world, in which we are always experiencing the real through a plurality of approaches that can never be constitutively traced back to a static unity of world picture. For this reason, we will study what are the metaphysical presuppositions of the project of world picture in order to be aware of the fact that today a world picture in an holistic view is made impossible from knowledge itself, and in which the image model plays an essential and constitutive role. This will allow us to reconsider the philosophical relationship between image and reality, and even to overcome by art the dichotomy between illusion and reality, and between perspectivism and multi-perspectivism introduced in the second lecture, what I mentioned before. That is, if I think that it's possible to get one and only one general perspective on the world, every multi-perspectival approach will appear a sort of rude relativism, okay? But also the fascist approach to the world introduced today, where there is a multi-perspectivism, there is sort of relativism of culture, no words, and so on and so on. It's just a more complicated like that, because multi-perspectivism is the key feature to approach a complex world. And it's not saying that a multi-perspectivism can be reduced to a perspective that will be a sort of panopticon, a sort of general view like the view of God on the world. For human people, that is impossible, not just because we don't believe in a generalistic view, because Gödel, the physics and so on show us that it's more difficult as it seems appear. Tradition is the second. And then the last two lectures, ontological problem of complex systems, that you were asking maybe already now what damn it is a complex system, what damn it is complexity. Remarks is not saying that our definitional tool can fulfill and answer the question. But anyway, starting from the epistemic perspective of a multi-perspectivism or a multifocal perspectivism, or what Willard von Orman Quine introduced in the late 60s, 69, ontological relativity. The 18th lecture will focus on the logical problem of complex phenomena, in particular on three problems. One being that of ontological relativity or plurality of ontology, that is, of kinds of object. Okay? The second being that of coexistence of multiple ontologies in a complex system such an ecosystem. If we model, if we make a taxonomy of an ecosystem, for example, or if you make a taxonomy of your body, of your metabolism, and so on and so on, you have many ontologies, and if you reduce one ontology to the other, the second ontology to the third, and so on, till atom and molecules, you lost the whole information on the biological system by having just a machine. The second being that the coexistence of multiple ontologies in a complex system, and the third being of that of emergence of new kinds of phenomenal stuff. What is one of the key issues of contemporary ontology and metaphysics. Key issues of contemporary ontology and metaphysics since 70 years, but anyway. So three problems, stepped one to one. The first is to be able to conceive a sort of ontological relativity. Many levels of reality or the many kinds of reality that are irreducible one to another. Or we can epistemically reduce one to another by this sort of consistent loss of information that give loss to the whole of complexity of the phenomenon itself. That is plurality of ontology. The second is coexistence of multiple ontologies in a complex system. And emergence. You say, I mean, that is a sort of empty problem. Okay? I will not say take a moment, because when we model ecosystem, when we model biosystems, okay, even starting from the cell, if we model supply chain system, markets, and so on, we have to model. That is, we have to develop, for the first step, taxonomies. And even we don't know that such taxonomy has a sort of ontological character, we handle with ontologies. Okay? So, one of the key objections could be, okay, but ontology does not interest us because it's too far, too theoretical, and so on and so on. It's not the case, because ontology is in our brain at first. Identifying object with the kind, okay, is already ontological. So think the plurality of ontology, irreducible of ontology, emergence of new ontologies. And not something dealing with academic staff of Oxford, Cambridge, Freiburg, professor philosophizing on his armchair. It's something that orients our world to identify something as such. If we are unable to think the relativity of ontologies, the coexistence of ontology, not in the world itself, but also in a single phenomenon, okay? And the emergence of the ontology, we are unable to fix and grasp a huge part of phenomenal world. Let's say even 95% of our world. Because our world is made, or single phenomena are made by this coexistence and emergence about ontology. about of our approach to a world subspecie complexitatis, that is from the point of view of complexity. To do this, we will discuss these and debates contemporary philosophy, the fields of analytic ontology, metaphysics, and from phenomenology. Based on the theoretical acquisition of the sixth lecture, in the eighth lecture, we'll deepen from a structural point of view the idea of invariance of complex phenomena. That is, okay, complex phenomenon is heterogeneous, complex phenomenon is difficult to grasp, complex phenomenon needs some scientific tools that we don't have, but anyway, as a certain consistency, okay? When I speak about an ecosystem, when I speak about the familiar interaction in a well-defined society, I don't speak about air. I speak about something consistent. And complexity arises from this consistency. And there is even an antidote to speak about a complex world in a fuzzy view without certainty or without stability and so on and so on. And I take an example, and it takes an example of your own body. Your own body is one, or our brain is one of the most complex systems we can observe. Okay? And it's consistent. Neuroscience discovered this consistency even while being complex. Okay? Based on the theoretical acquisition of the selector, the eighth lecture will give the structural point of view of the idea of invariance of complex phenomena. This invariance means also consistency. Okay? It depends to decide, like in this small picture, where we have to find and to search the consistency of something. Okay? To do this, we will move from an ontological to a meta-ontological consideration, always keeping within the debate of contemporary philosophy. The purpose of elaborating this theoretical acquisition is to arrive to a general but consistent epistemic ontological scheme for reading and understanding complexity of certain phenomena and their multidimensionality. From this point of view, the question will be raised as to whether the convergence of multiple theoretical meta-theory and epistemic approach can identify something as a complex phenomenon, and whether such a meta-theoretical or meta-ontological conception can be taken as a guiding thread for reading global phenomena. And such discourse, when applied to concrete phenomena, make more sense. There is not an M-chain thing. For example, if you take today management courses, especially coming from Harvard and so on, where the systemic approach is taught since 30 years, okay? You have to do with sort of complexity inside the matter itself of approach, of economy, for example. For example, every aspect of pulsional economy, okay? So I buy a Mac because I'm fine, I will be recognized as a cool guy. There's a pulsional economy. There's an economy that's dealing not by need, but sort of other factors, implies the complexity of the mind, the complexity of desire, and so on and so on. That people take in account in order to sell, but you have to also take into account in order to understand, okay? Or, for example, if you model today in order to build, not just in order to understand, a supply chain market, okay? You have to deal with socio-economical issues, geographical issues, the instability of ecosystems, and so on, and many factors that are in the economic model itself of the thing, okay? Then, in the eighth lecture, we will move toward a fundamental link between a theoretical and educational point of view, that between complexity and inter- or transdisciplinarity. starting from our frame of understanding, reading, and categorizing complex phenomena from a meta-ontological and a meta-theoretical perspective, we'll begin to define philosophically and conceptually the link between complexity and the need for interdisciplinary approach. But the problem is, in order to deal with something, a problem, an aspect, and something like that interdisciplinarily, we have at first to need interdisciplinarity itself. That is, to need that interdisciplinarity is not an optional issue, but it's the key issue in order to grasp the phenomenon itself. In many approaches, for example, people say, okay, complexity need interdisciplinarity. Why need interdisciplinarity? Because there is many aspects. And why interdisciplinarity? Where we have to deal with complex systems, and then they are multifaceted, and then the question is solved. Not really, I will say, because just in order to just once understood what is complexity from a meta-ontological point of view, that is what is of the thing needs multiple theories, as multiple ontology, we become aware that we need an interdisciplinary approach. Instead, it's just rhetoric. It's cool to make interdisciplinary issues, to address interdisciplinary issues. It's cool to think about complexity. Let's make that as a play, but we don't really understand what is the need of interdisciplinarity today. From this definition, we will endeavor to define the forms of multi-perspectival approaches to the complex from the point of view of thinking, capable to bringing together multidisciplinary approaches and merging them into a new epistemic and educational dimension. Because without an education to see other forms of something, I'm not sure that we are able, beyond the words, to understand what interdisciplinarity is. So, what is it? Is a mix between vegetables, meal, and so on, just as we will? No, it's not just as we will. It's something guided by the inner features of that something that we have to approach or to describe. Okay? And that's what this is sort of the educational, pedagogical key issues that we will address in the last lecture, that is in the 8th lecture. So, we have still time, 10 minutes? So, in order to introduce us to what we will need to understand, let's just watch 2 tutorials that will be serve as appetizer for the next sessions and for the dialogues after. Okay? So. I'm not connected to internet. Why cannot? There is no connection here? Yes, now. Sorry. Okay, no problem. Oh. Huh? So I will put into. I had. Sorry? No, it will manually. cannot. Why you can?
In this video, we will be giving an overview to the area of complexity theory.
Why they cannot? Because of.
स्क्रीन एक्सपेंड करना है
What? It's in English. Huh? Okay, the method to full screen. No. So maybe we'll watch this tomorrow.
नो यू नीड टू एक्सटेंड द स्क्रीन देयर इज वन ऑप्शन
I listen.
We could take a break and then do it. We could take a break and then
Yeah,
do it.
take a break. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's take a break. We will. that there will be just question and answer, because of course we don't have a material to work about, okay? So it's just question of concept that they are not still clear, or they are still unclear, or information about the course and so on and so on. If you have questions, that is, the workshop is active. Usually, you have to ask or to participate. It's not a frontal lecture, but please, if you have questions.
You can ask about specifically theoretical and all about the course and references.
So just in order to explain what how we will proceed, I will send today, put today in the drive the today slides presentation, and put even the presentation for tomorrow by indicating the material to read. So you have the whole morning in order to read, and then put eventually also for after tomorrow. You know, you have sort of scope on the first section, okay? It's matter of preparing, smelling what it is, and so on, by knowing that the essential features, conceptual features, will be explained in the course. So we will, in order to, starting from zero, in order to say what is a phase space, what me asked before, what is the authors, and so on and so on. And in the workshop you can ask. For example, tomorrow we deal with something that can easily be unknown, even for students of Babu Talias in India, that is perspectival art. In Europe, not perspective art, in Europe, because we invented it. And if you don't know, tomorrow in the workshop we will explain, we'll make a little journey on Renaissance art and explain how this revolution is deeply linked with scientific revolution. Or when you will read, for example, on Heisenberg and on Kurt Gödel and so on and so on, the easier thing is to Wikipedia and search. Okay, search on Wikipedia other documents, introductory documents, just in order to have elementary, basic notion on whom we will speak about, and so on and so on. Okay, there is, of course, as I mentioned before, we cannot fulfill a deep understanding of every single moment, because it's a matters of life. For example, to understand how perspectival art define a paradigm of knowledge, and how this paradigm of knowledge will then fulfilled or defined by Descartes and Newton. I cannot explain in 2 hours, but is a sort of preliminary introduction in order to understand how the objective science of nature will be built, and how the new science of complexity does not discard the new science, the modern science in whole, but just enlarge or the wide some aspect of that by introducing the complex, and so on and so on. For example, you're not sensed to know the whole work of René Descartes, so it would be better even to know René Descartes and Isaac Newton. But anyway, if you are fresh, it's just serve to introduction what the science is in general, okay? What experimental science is in general, and how it's introduced to a double, to a double challenge. One is to maintain the conceptual rigor of their science. The other is to take distance from the metaphysical holistic presupposition of the science in itself in order to understand complex phenomena. So I will indicate slide by slide because I will put in the drive before what you have to read or to pre-read in order to come in the room not so naked in order to understand. Okay? Other question about already said things? Yeah?
Thanks, sir, for your presentation today. So I have two questions.
Yeah.
Mike.
So thank you so much for your presentation. I have two questions from your presentation, but I'm afraid all these are going to be a part of next lectures, but if you can indicate possible responses. So when we are talking about complexities and complex systems, are all complexities composed of simple ones, or are we presupposing that there are complexities which are irreducible? That are ontologically complex, cannot be reduced to something which is simpler? That is the first question. And the second question is regarding the bifurcation of process, that is an obstruction. Can it be regarded as a bifurcation, or is it just a part of continuity? Thank you.
So the first question, regarding the complexity and reductionism, it will be just matter to understand how to deal with it, because usually where a complex pattern emerges, it cannot be reduced to a lower level or to another level. That is to the analytical description of interaction of its parts. If we have a reduction, the phenomenon is not, or the pattern is not emergent, and we can also find in the theory approaching the lower level elements an explanation for it. But the problem is, if the higher level can be reduced to a lower level, is not a level as such. So it's a level as such when we cannot approach the dynamics inner to the level without reduction. That is the problem we talked about one other fellow colleague before, about strong and weak emergence, and we will approach in the last two lectures in order to say if we will be able to. So there is another taxonomic problem. There is a sort of eraser. Maybe here? No. So first methodological step, we will approach that, but we have time anyway. You have to think that a reality is made on multiple layers, okay? Okay, and something emerging at that level can be reduced to the lower level. already I would say be careful, because the multidimensionality of complexity is not a sort of layer cake representation. There is already a simplistic representation. We talked about it, of course, in a workshop last month on emergence and reduction. Even such representation, this bidimensional representation, is something reductionistic or simplistic, because complex phenomenon by its multidimensionality presupposes a sort of multiplicity of spaces that are not sort of layers, a sort of different dimension interacting, square, diagonal, and so on and so on. So, assuming that a complex phenomenon be representable, structurally representable, like a layer cake, and I do not agree at all, but anyway, you can reduce L4 to you can reduce L4 to L3 in the sense that if L3 follows L4, but then they are not sort of eigenphenomenon, that is a sort of typic phenomenon of that level of complexity. But the problem is, in general reductionistic stance, that if you can reduce L4 to L3, you presuppose that you can reduce L4 to L1. This is sort of strong reductionism. Is something irreducible, then something other is reducible, and so on and so on. Then we have to study just completely the dynamics of L1 in order to be able to explain what's happening on the upper layers. That is metaphysically very, very loaded from the point of view of concrete descriptions. So we have, in order to claim such general reduction, we have just to adopt a simplistic model of layer superposition, and then to think that if something irreducible to the inferior level, then everything is reducible. I will propose in the 8th lecture a sort of just purely descriptive things. We can, of course, reduce that to that, but the problem is with loss or not of information. So the problem is, in my view, not a metaphysical one, it's sort of pragmatical one. That is, we can reduce, but when we lost the typicity of the phenomenon we are describing, the reduction is unuseful, okay? We can also say, by reducing L4 phenomenon at L4 to phenomenon to L3, we can explain something, okay? But if we can explain everything, that will be just another phenomenon of L3, and there is not upper level, or upper layer, okay? So the problem is precisely our need to reach, our metaphysical need to reach a unique view on complexity, and not to take the time to differentiate what can be reduced, what cannot be reduced, and if the reduction brings to sort of epistemic result. And epistemic result is to explain what are invariances, what are not invariances, and so on and so on. You know, this is thank you for the question. This is a very, very decisive point on complexity science. If we will to say everything once for all about the complex, we don't reach the goal. It's more differentiated at that, without losing clarity and rationality. Of course, if you reduce my desire, for example, my expectation, to neuronal interaction, I put a Doppler machine on my brain or the scanner on my brain, I say that certain areas will be activated and so on and so on. But that enables me to say that all my expectations come from neuronal activation. That is the question. Can I rightly deduce the horizon of my life, my desire, my expectations, and so on, from neuronal point of view? And not only from society, not also neural point of view integrated with societal point of view of culture, point of view of market, and so on and so on. That is the question. Of course, when we reduce, we take something or we reach something, but this something is a reduced view of the phenomenon itself. Then it's a sort of not a virtuous circle, but a sort of locus and un lucendo. That is, okay, we reach to explain, but people, reductionistic people try to explain how our mathematical intuition come from neurons. Of course, it's located in our mind or in our spirits, but till we are not able to explain how our mathematical intuition comes from a precise interaction, that is precisely mapped interaction among our neurons, such reduction is just a metaphysical claim. Like people that say everything or the many kind in nature are strong emergent. This is a metaphysical claim. This is that we make no step forwards in order to for understanding what that complex phenomenon is. Can you repeat the second question, please?
The second point was regarding the bifurcation of a process, and the question was, can obstruction be Thank you. So the second question was, while talking about bifurcation of process, when an obstruction occurs during a process, can that be considered as a moment for bifurcation, or is it a sign of continuity? That was the second question.
Well, so bifurcation of a process had not everything to do with the continuity of time, because it's a process, of course. It's located in sort of time continuity, but the bifurcation is not the bifurcation of time, it's bifurcation of the process located in time. So if I have a tendency, for example, in a linear function of acceleration or falling down of a body, and so on and so on, the continuity of the process is not entirely depending on the continuity of time. It goes per se, that is located in the continuity of time. And the problem is if the tendency, the behavior of the process follow always the same tangential direction. So for this case, for this reason, we have to conceive a phase space, another kind of spatiality, in order to think or to see the bifurcation of a process. I have colleagues a colleague that say that complexity can just be stochastic. There is no deterministic chaos. I'm very doubtful about it, but anyway, it's a stronger version of it. That is, stochastic processes are located in continuity of time, but it is not deterministic clear. And the problem is precisely to switch between a sort of homogeneous representation of space-time as physical quantity and a representation of a phase-space process. There's just another thing of another kind of subject matter. Okay, the bifurcating does not mean that the process opens another horizon of time in order to deal with it. It's the same horizon of time, but the tendency, the behavioral tendency of the attractor changes. And that is what we fail or we miss in order to understand rightly, even, I say even philosophically, complex phenomena, because we don't have the right representation, okay, the right tools. In order, we say tomorrow and after tomorrow, but in order to understand an homogeneous causality between objects, people had to develop another idea of space, okay? In order to develop, or in order to even visualize is a bit too strong, to have a clear sight on indetermination principle. This is a general feature of quantum phenomena. People have to develop Hilbert space or modification of wave function by Schrödinger that are located as a representation in another spatial framework. For this reason, or a complex world, let me take roughly generalizing in order to say. Complex world is a new dimension of our world. The world has always been complex, but we discover it to be complex very recently. And without such work on conceptuality, on structures, we take it always as a mystical framework. Okay? I will not say that we come back to the Shiva vision, but in a way we are in this direction. Heraclitean fluxus, everything's becoming and changing, multiple things. So we remain in the narrative or in metaphorical mythology. The work on conceptual tools, it what make the difference between a superstitious and a not superstitious approach to complexity. So, but there is also the problem with society, because if I have to explain, okay, what is bifurcation of climate systems to people that even are not able to think of formal dry-dimensional orthogonal space, how can I explain that and then make influence on political strategy and so on, or let people approach the difficulty of political strategies to take when the people are not able to grasp in other way other formal spaces or other form of temporality of process. For this reason, just in order to come back to bifurcation and so on, I mentioned the butterfly effect. And when I say in my lectures, in my courses, seminars, that the butterfly, where is the butterfly effect about? It's not a real butterfly. The people are a bit shocked. But all people know that the butterfly effect is that here, the butterfly is that strange attractor that seems or that looks like a butterfly. Okay? There is a huge difference, because in one case we take the thing superstitious. Okay, the power of a small butterfly, it means that nature can blah, 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 blah. In the other case, we take a picture of something, but we apply that picture to consistent tool to understand what the bifurcation is. it can even be that the fluttering of a butterfly in Brazil can generate a tornado in Canada or somewhere else, but it's not the salient thing of the butterfly effect, because in the middle there is model, there is computation, and so on and so on, you know? Even to take, for example, multidimensionality, if you quote, for example, if you show Matrix key master scene from Matrix Part 2, Matrix Revolution, it's funny, but we cannot remain to this level. Where the many dimensionality is something serious. So now we can deal with many dimensions. We can not only deal, but we can handle with many dimensions and understand the form or the grasp or the manage the form of representation in which a multidimensionality is located or by which is presented is not trivial. So I was reading before coming for Christmas a book on the plurality of theories, wherein the author, as a colleague from France, study how the three different versions of general mechanic make a huge difference in order to understand the world. People maybe are not sensitive to know there is a Newtonian mechanic in the form of general gravitational mechanics, this is classical science, general mechanics, Lagrangian mechanics, and Hamiltonian mechanics. But the form of handling with such notation, this is with sort of concept, is not trivial, because instead the work of rationality is, this is philosophy, is zero. And then we can understand complexity by saying, okay, we are a new era. We have to discard every form of rationality based upon space, geometry, I don't know, and take political decision on what? On feelings, but it's a bit too risky, what they say, no? Yes? You have to give your microphone. Here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the beautiful lecture. I have two small questions or queries. Maybe they will come in the further lectures that you are going to deliver in the upcoming days. But still, from the presentation, that question came to my mind. So one question is, when we are talking about the complex word, understanding of complex word, are you also including the human beings inside of that word or outside of that word? Because in the presentation, it doesn't seem that the human beings of part. Because if we are talking about the complexity of the word, which is as a material word existing outside, then are we presupposing that human mind is capable of understanding the complexity, which is, no, human mind is capable, but the complexity is existing outside. So we have to understand that.
This is the first question.
No, I mean, it's a part of this question. So how is it like human beings are part of this complex world, or they are out of this complex world, trying to understand the complexity? So another question that I have, this is one question.
Can I answer?
Yeah, please.
So, right question. Of course, human is included in complexity and even a very strong instantiation of complexity. Such dichotomies, inner and outer, comes mostly from religion, where I come from Christianism, and maybe in Hinduism or in Buddhism in the East come from another things. But it's easy to think an inner and an outer. Mm-hmm. But if you will to check where this inner ends and when the outer begins, or vice versa, when the outer ends and the inner begins, such concepts does not work. I'm just writing a sort of last chapter about something that you're not interested in, because the complexity of our experience, okay? And then the first thing you have to do is to discard the Augustinian Christian idea that in the inner of man speak the truth of God, and then the other world is sort of gray process of bodies. There is not how it's work. Now, our mind, even mind is a very, our mind is as not an inner space. Where you can find beyond mystical vision where this inner space is. Where ends the inner space? Because in a metaphysical dichotomical worldview, the outer is what matter is, and the inner is what not matter is. That is, you can call spirit, you can call mind, you can call. But if you check that really by the local description, just by description, what our experience is, it's very difficult to divide the inner and the outer with a sort of epistemic or even phenomenological, philosophical pregnancy. Where is my inner of the? Where is the inner of the example of my old professor that I'm even inside when I teach to you, for example? Is this inner is located in a part of brain, in sort of spiritual cloud that comes to me? This makes no sense. So even if we assume, and we have enough evidence to assume now, that our mind is a sort of vibration, nicht vibration, vibration, this is vibrated vessel of intentional direction, it's very hard to say that the inner really exists. That inner is able to think to ourselves from a sort of soteriologic point of view, but has nothing to do with knowledge. And I say that because we needed more than 1.5 millenary to discard this vision in the West. So the first that discarded, or that helped to discard this vision, was Edmund Husserl by phenomenology, and Martin Heidegger. They say that the man is in the world. This is framed with the world. There is no inner man to whom God or the truth speaks in a sort of cluster or the closed space. So man is part and instantiation of that complexity. Even if you don't take in account matter and psyche or matter and mind, even at the most elementary level, if you take in account your own experience of the world, by concrete experience, you cannot decide there is a sort of fixed border between the in and the out. So let's figure out what is with biological processes and so on and so on.
Okay. So another question that I was having is this: when you refer to this hydrogen collider, that thing, and you gave it a metaphor of in your writing to Shiva's dance, right? So I was wondering why Shiva's dance only. Like how did this image came from, and what are the basis to refer it as a Shiva's dance? So I was.
That's come from the book. That's come from the Tao of physics. And the Friedrich Gabriel was a physician, and then people took this beautiful image and make the statue in order to exemplify the complexity of becoming and to open to another view of the world as a sort of cosmic dance. This is not, you asking to me from which book of Hindus religious text is taken. I don't know.
I was also like secular religion, secular science or scientificity. So in that light, I was thinking that how is it somebody that referring to Shiva? Why they must have thought of Shiva only? Why not something else? So I was thinking.
No, the problem is the modern science. Even that idea that science is opposed to religion is a very, very recent and strong positivistic one. I would say I'm a strong rationalist, but we are not to cut off. So to say, okay, year ends science and begins religion, or the year ends religion and begins science. We are human and complex process even in our intelligence of the world. So the radical opposition will be excluded. The problem is our science, our rational knowledge, let us rediscover a form of spirituality hidden or presented by every form of religion in the world, okay? Or if science let us embrace a positive form of religion. I would exclude the second hypothesis, but I would strongly affirm the first. And I published, and is even in the drive, a chapter wherein I show how quantum mechanics are linked, or the protagonists of quantum mechanics are linked to this form of spirituality, that is, the form of questioning about the mystery of the world outside or parallel to the work of objectivation in physics and things like that. That is, we are human, we ask questions that cannot be answered by science, or still cannot be answered by science, but that deprive us not from spiritual needs or the spiritual opening of the world. The problem is with concrete dogmatic religions. That I will exclude, because the rule of the rationality is to deconstruct and refutate prejudice that come from historical religions. I will say racial diversity, or metaphysical identity, metaphysical sexual identity, and so on and so on. There's nothing to do with spirituality, So a man can be rational and can pursue his own spiritual quest about the meaning of the world without embracing concrete dogmatic form of religion,
Can I just, I want to ask a different question, but I think this all, what happened in the early or 16th century, Descartes, after a long phase of medieval scholastic, the philosophy, there was a philosophy of science, like Philosophia Naturalis, but it was predominantly a belief system, so a system of belief, and where dogmas were very powerful. So from that doxastic or dogmatic to epistemic, that turn that happened with Descartes. So there are interesting studies about that, a lot of studies about that. What came to my mind of Gaukroger, Stephen Gaukroger, who passed away last year, I think, I don't know. So he had the science shaping modernity. So he says that what happened with this interaction between religion and science, always you take something from, it's reciprocity. So what happened, the science very tacitly took the doctrinal nature from religion, and religion the rational nature from science. So there was always a mutual exchange that happened. And then the question is, we think that with Descartes and the early modern philosophers and scientists, Galileo, Newton,
Leibniz.
Robert Hooke, Leibniz,
world.
all of them, and we established a knowledge system, a system of knowledge, without thinking how much belief in that. So, I mean, how much belief is there in science? Lot of beliefs, no? But then in the axiomatics, the mathematical formula, that, I mean, it's no wonder that, this establishing the culture of episteme was through the method of negation. And what negated was the existence. Yeah, the secondary qualia and other thing, etc. So it's a kind of negating the entire existence and appropriating as a subjective. So I just want to ask, related to that, in the first slides you mentioned phenomenality. This is something which is very puzzling. What exactly is phenomenality? Because the moment you say phenomenality, I try to understand. Okay, but the problem is I cannot. I have to divorce from myself to a realm of objects. So there is a limit to which I can do that. How do I reach the phenomena? Yeah. So
You know whom you're asking for. The problem is I use, for this reason, for the reason of your first question, phenomenality, because I will to present a sort of metaphysically neutral manifestation of the word. So the problem is everyone get access to phenomenality because he lives or she lives. It's not say that everyone get access to the world in the form of objects, of things, or sexual differentiation, or hierarchies of societies, and so on and so on. That is, to claim the phenomenality or the complexity of a phenomenal world is a phenomenological gesture to exclude every further or previous incoming metaphysical differentiation that we are not able to ground completely. What Husserl does with experience. Experience is at first experience of something, but there is not a thing beyond. There is not a thing in this Aristotelian sense, there is not a thing even in the Kantian sense, and so on and so on. It's a peer, that's for sure, because we speak about it. But which form or which forms we can epistemically apply to this experience are not said in before. So I will make the same gestures for a complex word. To say the word is complex, it's in my view sort of naive metaphysical step that educated philosophers are not to accomplish. Or nature has strong metaphysical emergence. After Kant, every claim about the structure of the world must go through the subjectivity, constitution of meaning, and so on and so on. For this reason, I was talking with the students about emergence, a very, very enemy about the idea of strong reduction or strong emergence. It is by metaphysical necessity, life is strong emergence, for example. If you will, if you go into the argumentation of metaphysical strong emergence, philosophically is very, very weak. Because what Kant and some transcendentalists learned to us is that before claiming that the nature is made in one way we assume to be, we have to deal with a long and painful philosophical exploration and adapting, and that the thing an sich, that is the thing in itself, is reachable directly from our experience, is very, very hard to claim.
No, it's again this all see the multiple ontology, as you suggested, and the complexity. But I'm really amazed by or perplexed by philosophy's obsession with singularity. Obsessed with singularities, in ontology and in epistemology, especially in ontology. One substance, the pre-Socratian. What is the one substance? Yeah? And again, from Thales to Descartes, you find that one's the first principle, and reduced to that res cogitans, res extensa, to a few entities. So in the ontological framework, as compared to probably a discourse like individuation of scholasticism, a multiple way of individuating, as a mental, metaphysical, and material, yeah, and even the individuation of God and all. So the truth is that this obsession with singularity is a philosophical problem. Yeah,
but then it's a metaphysical term. This is what they say. Just will not interrupt. Is this a metaphysical Naturanlage?
Yeah, so we have that
tendency to grasp the unique.
No, it's just like the metaphysics starts with Aristotle. Every man has a striving for knowledge, and every philosophy has a striving for that singular object. But the fact that, based on your subject, the complexity and the multiplicity of ontology, isn't it a kind of participation of various things, a methexis? Yeah, within the context of this world. Yeah, again the phenomenality, because I cannot divorce from the secondary qualia of the object, because this is from my mind. So I mean, I can't. It's a synthesis at the level of phenomenal synthesis, I would say, and beyond that, I cannot approach the phenomena.
So it's a very rich question. I would say. Traditional form of knowledge, even before philosophy, have been obsessed by unicity. Where episteme come from were not the case, because Greek culture were not obsessed by unicity, with a sort of pluralistic, pantheistic, polytheistic nature, and not by cause, but not by chance, invented episteme. But 2,500 years before, after the whole becoming of Western metaphysics, we can, I presume, or we must, following also Heidegger, but also Quine, Quine, by claiming the ontological relativity, criticized this unique version of Aufbau der Welt, or the construction of the world, by Carnap. Or Goodman, even after, can we ask if we still are in need of this fake unicity to which reduce everything, So, for example, you mentioned Aristotle and Plato. The reductio ad unum by Plato is stronger than Aristoteles, as we know. Aristoteles also, because it's the telos, this is the goal of science, to unify, to put together, to grasp together, this begriff. But one thing is take this unifying principle as a guiding one. One other thing is to mystically hypostasize in a sort of real principle. That is why my studies on evolution of modern metaphysics, Kant and so on, and converge with this idea of complexity. Because maybe for the first time we reach a sort of opening to the phenomenal world that doesn't need the hypostasis, the strong presupposition of a unique word, unique feature of the world, and so on and so on. We don't need of it to live, because we are in a plural global world. And then because now we have to ask what this happens when two uniques conflict in contradiction. And we don't need now, even in order to know or to have a global view on the world. There's one thing is a global synoptical philosophical opening to the world that has to do with the unicity of our horizon of thinking. One thing is the metaphysical unity. There's two different things. And I think that at the end of Western metaphysics, there's one good of the end of metaphysics, of the become aware of the end of metaphysics, let's say Heidegger Überwindungsaufsatz, we have no longer a need to adopt such strong hypotheses in order to think our own horizontal opening to knowledge. For example, you mentioned Aristotle. Even Aristotle, okay, the proto-episteme, but if there is matter to characterize this proto-episteme, as Zetumene, you don't know how to name it. In one case is ontology, in one case is theology, and the people need even 1,000 years in order to elaborate what is this duplicity. So duplicity is work as inner contradiction in these claims of a unique world, unique nature, and the rationalism of Kant, in my view, is the better antidote to such metaphysical worldview.
I think that the tool was always epistemological. See the nobility. And for example, I will give you an example. Till the 16th century, the four causation was very prevalent. Aristotle. Suddenly the causa efficiens became the sole form of causation. Causa formalis, finalis, essentialis are also gone. So there is a tendency in the epistemology to limit that nobility and to create such singularity. That is my...
This is just how we have to receive the heritage of modern science. Because, of course, I agree, and for this reason I disagree with the people like Edgar Morin or even the criticism of Van der Schuer by saying every modern science and modern philosophy are reductionist. No. In order to understand better the world at that time, the people was in need to simplify. In order to emancipate from the Christian scholastic authorities, they need to make such gesture. In order to establish a world based on rationality, technology, progress improvement, etc., the world was in need to make such simplification, but we are not forced to adopt fully that as vision of the world. Now we know that qualitative is as decisive as quantitative, even in science. Bifurcation is a sort of punctuative, qualitative moment in a quantitative process. The problem is how we deal with our rationalist heritage. In my view, the gesture of Galilei and Descartes was necessary. So we have no new world without it. So people can criticize how much they will Descartes, Galilei, Newton by saying there are reductionists and so on and so on. Without Galilei and Descartes, our society will be unconceivable. And I'm very happy that Galilei and Descartes made what they made. But we can deal also with an heritage. We cannot adopt everything. So to say now, after transcendental philosophy, phenomenology, and so on, just in order to remain to classical philosophy, we are able to say there is sort of step made by such rationalists that are not self-evident. Okay? But there is a very, very interesting book made from a wonderful French scholar, Denis Cambouchner, that is Descartes has not said. We attribute to Descartes what Descartes has not said. to say that, for example, if I think this something is just qualitative, das ist res extensa. If you go to the text, it's more nuanced as we received. Descartes says, if I will clearly and distinctly understand what is a thing, I have to think it as a quantitative, with quantitative tools, and then I can name it res extensa, but it not means that the extension that is quantitative is only feature of the thing itself.
I just would like to go back to the point you started with, that our existential situation, is, which modern science, since Descartes, Galileo, what that whole climate has, pulled us into, is an existential situation that we are disoriented, right? Disoriented towards a kind of seeing things into simples, a kind of reducing into certain entities alone, by removing or ignoring the other related aspects, contexts, etc. So, if that is the case, and then we have to come out of that, then what would be that orientation which we originally had? And I'm assuming that that is definitely not a kind of naive objectivism, in the sense that, okay, we see things as they are, but something else, right? That that orientation from which we were disoriented into should be something quite complex, right? And then we have to see the our first step, or our first objective would be to understand the nature of that original orientation, isn't it?
Can you reformulate just the last statement?
Yeah, no, I was just saying that, with modern science, since you mentioned that with modern science we were disoriented into a certain attitude of ignoring ignoring related entities, and then isolating singular or like simple
I
objects.
say that modern science is accused from
Yeah.
the partisans of a naive view of complexity to remove the context, to remove the casual, and so on and so on. Because I'm not accused of modern science.
Yeah.
These modern partisans of complexity say, okay, enough with modern science, we have to do with a new kind of world. I not agree at all.
Yeah. So if that is the case, and then modern science should have, or like our attitude or orientation should be more open. And if that orientation should be more open, what would be the characteristics of that? In that sense, we cannot directly go to an epistemological inquiry, right? We have to sort of understand in what way we are related to the world, and then it has to be something, it has to be either, let's say, transcendental, or it has to be a very idealist kind of metaphysics. We have to develop a certain metaphysical worldview, right, with which we are seeing this complexity.
So I would say, just in order to come back to the modern science, because people, I'm studied in Paris and in Italy, so Galileo and Descartes are just not two names, are just the horizon of thinking. So what the modern science do, and what few people understand or suggest, is the modern science claim, or that works in the direction of make our world perception, or the world idea shareable from everyone. What made science at all? So the difference and the opposition between secularized thinking or rational thinking and religion is that everyone has his own codes, religious code. Everyone has his own cosmogony, deity creating the world, and so on and so on. But with science, we share a unique horizon of discussing about it. It's quite different because people are very, very quiet with religion just when they don't conflict each other. Okay? When they conflict each other, we have example now, that is still problematic. So what science in rationalistic modern sense of meaning of words do is to say first claim a statement of discours de la méthode Descartes. Human reason is shared by every human fellow at the same level. There is no partial illumination, election from one God that chooses to say to me the truth and the other not to say, to reveal it, and so on and so on. There's very, very universalistic, tolerant things. What science has to do now with the disorientation of our complex world is to build patterns of reorientation. It's not made so that I'm ecologist because I'm sympathizing with the bird on my window or with my pet and so on, but because there are intrinsic reasons to conceive the human life as connected with nature, okay? And that is made by science, by individuation of variance and invariance. Feeling is a very good thing, even for civilization, but it's very risky to build a common life, a life or a cooperation between civilization on feeling. It could be turned out to very, very deep conflicts. Whenever, if you have objectivities in science, not absolute objectivities, but invariance, we share a common stuff on which we can discuss. Disagree, agree, but anyway, this is something on this side that is accessible to everyone. So, what science or the rationality does is to make of this disorientation a common space of construction. Dialogical, conflictual, dialectical, as you will, but anyway, I take stance for something not because at the time I'm Catholic, you're Muslim, or they are Hindu, but because we are men, we can discuss on rational issues together with the same capacity to discuss, to individuate invariance and so on, and the same now. I'm sympathetic with nature not because I'm sympathizing with my cat and then I generalize the cat as the nature, or my birds, or my snake, no. But because the essential features of society is to live on nature, and with the destruction of nature, even the human society are destroyed, or even for global economy and so on and so on. So on the ground of a rational discussion, we can acknowledge that independently from the effects, the neoliberal doctrine of economy is a fake, and then share new vision, discuss new issues, and so on and so on. The science has always made the same things since its discovery. That is individuate, shareable, common, invariance among variances. That is what this episteme is. That is foundation on a common ground. And what is most urgent now to reevaluate, not sort of mysticism feelings for nature, because good, it is good, and not against, but we don't build a society or the global society on it. That is Today, you know, we live in a sort of shift era, and then people, they have no time or work or will or force to filter heritage, say, okay, just take in block one thing and discard, and so on and so on. Okay? For example, decolonial things, they okay, we discard every form of Western civilization because there is domination. What I say? So be careful, okay? Because, or people say, I don't know, we discard rationalism because rationalism is the form of domination. If you read the rationalist writings, it don't seem so. So it's made from people that will be new with all fanatic tools, either with me or against me. And that is not rationality. Rationality is sharing on evidences. So in order to reorientate not myself as individual, but ourselves as belonging to different cultures, society, converging on the same problem, global problem, it's better to use rationality as private feelings.
Questions further?
Questions?
Yeah, I think for today.
Yeah. Okay. No problem.
So just announce
And the next building.
the next debate.
Yeah.
You bring me.
Yeah.
You wait.
Sure. Yeah.